All right. Hello, everybody. I hope that you can hear me. Welcome in. It is so good to have you all again for this last evening of our week-long piano boot camp. You're going to hear a few dingings. This is people getting ready to come into Zoom with me. So we are going to jump in and get started. Let's see. Let me just take 1 second to get everything squared away. There we are. Well, welcome in. Like I said, I'm so excited that you're all here. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, for taking the initiative to make some progress with your piano practice. It's really awesome that you are all here. I am curious to know how your homework went and if it's going well, if you did anything so far from the boot camp. So you can go ahead, if you're watching the live stream, you can go ahead and just chat that in, or if you're in Zoom, you're welcome to raise your hand and let me know how it's going, unmute, chat about it a little bit, and then we'll dive in for today. I'll just wait to see if anybody wants to share anything. So today is completely all about you. Today is just question and answers. I was realizing after Wednesday's class when I got finished teaching, and I was like, whew, we went over a lot on Wednesday. There was a lot in that hour-long class. And so I want to make sure that we get any questions answered, whether they are about things that we've gone over in this last week of Piano Bootcamp, or if they're things that are unrelated, but you have with your learning and all of that. So let me know. If you have any questions, you can type them in the chat. Those of you that are in Zoom, you can raise your hand. You can also type into the Zoom chat, and that way, you can even just type your name or type your question in the chat, and then I can go through them and make sure that I get to all of them in case, as more people join, I don't see you physically raising your hand. So if anybody has questions, go ahead and type them in. Let's get started. I'm going to warm us up. I have a couple of questions from the form that people submitted. So I'll just kind of get started with that so that we can, there we go. 1 second. Yeah, I'll get started with the form, and that way you all can get kind of into the mode of thinking about music and thinking about piano. And then if you have anything, just bring it up as it comes up. Let me just get this squared away. There we go. All right. So our first question that we're going to cover tonight comes from, let's see. I'm not sure who it's from, but that's okay. We'll go through it, and hopefully whoever submitted this question, you can go ahead and answer it. So let's see. There we go. While practicing a piano piece, one has to come over playing any piano piece without a pause. You have to focus on many things while you're practicing and playing, like sight reading, looking at the keys and playing them, playing the right notes, keeping the tempo at the right pace, getting the dynamics, and it should sound musical and correct and all of that. And that is true. There's a lot going on when it comes to playing the piano. And so this person is asking for advice about all of those things. So how to play that and how to sight read and how to do all of that without pausing. And then also how to read the music without actually writing in the note names and things like that. So for this question, I would say there's several things, and we've covered some of them in this week-long boot camp, but basically taking things down to as simple as possible is going to be your best bet for this. So I like to think of learning a piece as layering, and we can't pay attention to all of the different layers until we're pretty clear on a few of the layers at one time, right? So starting with maybe just the rhythm and taking the piece and clapping and counting out loud. You can write the counting in. That's a really great way to focus on the rhythm and making sure that you get really confident with that rhythm, and then layer in the notes. So then you go to the notes and you make sure that while you're counting out loud and observing the rhythm, you're playing the notes. Now that alone might be too much, and that might, create mistakes and make you pause all over the place, especially if you're not super comfortable with the notes. And so that's when you can bring in other practice methods, like maybe the post-it method, where you just work on one measure over and over and over again until that feels super comfortable. And then you add a couple of notes at a time, and you do that until it feels easy. And then you add a couple of notes at a time. And once you can get through the whole entire piece that way with just the rhythm and just the notes, then you would repeat it with the dynamics, and then repeat it with the articulations, and repeat it with any other symbols that you need to add to the score, or any other things that need to be added to the score. And it sounds like a lot. And when you approach it this way for the very first time, it will feel like a lot, for sure. But you'll get used to this process. And when you're practicing, you're not just practicing the piece that you're working on, you're actually practicing the process of how you're practicing. And so that process starts to feel easier. And the more you do it and the more pieces you apply it to, the easier it becomes, the more simplified it is. And it'll get to the point that that process feels much more streamlined and you can do it pretty well. Now, the other thing is that with the note names, for suggestions on practicing note names, I would get flashcards. That's my favorite way, and I recommend that a lot here. And those of you that have been around probably have heard me say that a lot, but flashcards are really great. There's a pair of flashcards that I really love on my website, on my resources page, and it has all the note names, all the dynamic symbols, all the intervals, all the key signatures. And so you can just start with note names. And when you practice flashcards or anything, you practice anything with flashcards, whether it's note names or other concepts, you always want to just start with like 2 or 3 and do those 2 or 3. It'll take you a couple minutes to memorize them. And then you can add 1 or 2 more, and then add 1 or 2 more. And before you know it, usually within a week or so, people can actually get through all of the note names if they spend like 5 to 10 minutes a day on it. So that would be my recommendation for that. Oh, good. Someone in the chat said they used the Post-it method and it did help. That's awesome. Yeah, it's a pretty surefire way to get things going. So that's great. All right, I have more questions from the forum, but I want to make sure I get to people's questions. So anybody in Zoom, if you'd like to raise your hand or just unmute or turn your camera on, go ahead and start talking if you have a question. And same with the chat for those of you in the live stream, if you want to just type something in the chat, I'm happy to answer those, or I'll keep reading from the forum for now. All right. I always joke around in my college classes that I'm really good at waiting an awkward amount of time. So just jump in if you want to ask a question. Okay, let's see. What is my opinion on one of the biggest or the bigger piano debates, which is working on etudes a good idea versus there's no need for etudes, learn techniques technique in the context of the music that you're trying to learn. Haha. For example, small sections that give you trouble would become your etudes. That is such a great question. An etude is a musical study or a technical exercise like we were talking about on Wednesday. And I talked a lot about it on Wednesday. And to be honest, I don't use a ton of technical exercises with my students because of the second part of that question, or the second part of that option, which is that oftentimes your technical deficiencies are going to show up in whatever you're working on. And any difficult section of music can be turned into a technical exercise to practice so that you can overcome that exact section of music that you're trying to learn. And so sometimes if we think about it this way, it can be just a way to save time. There are some reasons that I use technical exercises like hand coordination, especially with adults that are like just getting started and maybe haven't played the piano before. That would be a reason that I would use some major 5-finger patterns or some technical exercises, but just a few, not endlessly and not forever. I mostly go that route actually, where if you have the instruction or you have someone that can help you turn a technical part of a piece into an exercise, that's what I do. And that's a lot, like I talk about practicing in rhythms a lot and practicing in flash practice. And I talk about those a lot in my video. I think it's called Practice Techniques to Fix Every Problem in Your Piano Playing. And I can link that in the description. And those are, those are basically technical exercises. You're taking a section of music and you're manipulating the rhythm and you're practicing it in a very specific way over and over at different tempos as you get faster and faster, which is in and of itself a technical exercise. So that's what I like to do. And I like to just approach those sections with exercises like that. All right. I'm gonna keep answering questions from the forum until I hear someone talk to me in Zoom. Okay, so how to practice giving equal strength to the fingers while playing. Sometimes I feel like not all of the fingers are touching down and holding properly, so I miss the sound of whole notes at times. That's a really good question. And I want to make sure that I'm interpreting it correctly. So I have 2 thoughts on this. So to practice giving equal strength to the fingers, when you feel like not all of the fingers are touching down and holding properly, that could mean a couple of different things. So if you're feeling like not all of the fingers are touching down on the keys and just like staying on the keys properly, you definitely want to make sure that you're keeping this rounded hand position and that you're really relaxed and that your whole body is like in alignment. That would be the first step. And it can be really challenging to get yourself to keep your hands in this position, because a lot of adults, when they first start out, when you play a note, like your fingers have a tendency to pop up, or I see this a lot in adult students. And so you want to work on something like a 5-finger pattern, or even just, playing 5 notes in a row on the piano with both hands, trying to get your fingers to stay down and to not pop up like that. Now, the other thing I'm wondering is if this question means like, when you actually press the note down, you're having trouble making a sound or getting that note to hold. And then I would say that is all about the weight of your arm. So if it's not so much about keeping your fingers glued to the keys, but it's more about the actual sound of the notes, making it to the bottom of the key bed, then you want to make sure that you're sitting up nice and tall. And I touched on this a little bit on Wednesday, but we can definitely touch more on it today because it's a really important subject. But basically, whenever we think about producing a tone on the piano or the keyboard, wherever you are, whatever instrument you're playing on, it's all about arm weight. And the number one thing that I see in beginners, and also it's a big difference of like a keyboard and an acoustic piano, is playing with just the fingers like this and trying to get our fingers to do all of the movement, which is not going to get us very far because our fingers are just kind of weak and helpless on their own. They need help. They need the help of our entire arm. And so if you can all let's do this exercise together. I want you to just kind of close your eyes and take a deep breath and think about your shoulders. And I want you to feel like tune into your shoulders, tune into your elbows, tune into your biceps, your triceps, your forearms, your wrists, and your fingers. And I want you to feel the weight of all of those parts of your arm just hanging from your shoulders. And if it's helpful, you can stand up and you can do this. This is something that you can actually like stand up and do a little bit of wiggling and just let your arms hang and feel that weight of them coming down from your shoulders. And whenever you're playing anything on the piano, you should be able to feel that weight. And if we think about it for a second, we can kind of tune into and really get in touch with that weight of our arms. And so when we go to produce a sound at the piano, whether it's a whole note or, it doesn't matter the rhythmic value, if you're trying to get those notes to hold, we don't want to think about our fingers just, pressing and holding. We want to actually think about the weight of our arm dropping into that key, and then letting that weight stay down and letting that weight continue to remain in the bottom of the key bed. And I'm bouncing just to kind of show you the feel of like letting that weight kind of pull you down and keep you down there in the key bed. And that will be a really great way to hold notes and to ensure that you make a sound at the piano. Because on an acoustic piano, and it happens occasionally on a keyboard, but especially on an acoustic piano, one of the things that happens often is we go to play a note, and especially if we're trying to play quiet, it doesn't sound at all. Right? And that's the worst. It's like a little phantom ghost note and we don't want that. So if you can tune into that weight and you can really practice that, that's going to be very helpful. One of the ways that I really like to have people work on that is to actually close their eyes. And it sounds awful. So it doesn't matter what you're playing on the piano, but you just close your eyes and you just let the weight of your arms drop onto the keys. Like just totally drop. And you can lean in a little bit too, so that you're playing. You want to be over the keys like this. So not so much back here, but you always want to be kind of like ready to go. And you just take a deep breath and then uncontrolled, let it drop. And I'm not going to actually let it drop because I have a toddler sleeping at the moment. But when you do, it might not sound very beautiful, but it's going to help you really engage with that feeling of the weight of your arm dropping into the keys. And once you get more comfortable with that feeling, then you can practice the weight drop with like a root position chord or an interval of a fifth or something like that. And you can actually start to put specific notes to it. But for starters, you don't even need to worry about the notes, just drop into the keys. Does anybody have questions about that? Or any other questions on that topic? Okay. That's a really, really, really great question. All right. Next question, an adult beginner self-studying, and they want to know what an ideal practice routine is for a beginner. Any suggestions are truly appreciated. So we did a little bit of this on Monday, but it's hard to say specifically, but I'll give you one. I'll give you a specific routine because it depends, like I was saying on Monday, on like how much time you have, what your goals are, all of that. But I would say if I just had to like name a practice routine for a beginner, I would say first of all, get some flashcards or download an app. Um, Flash Note Derby is a really fun app because it's a game and it helps you learn the note names, and you can pick like how many note names you want to work on at a time. So I always tell people to start with like 2 or 3, similar to the flashcards, and then add going beyond that. So I would do that. I have a playlist that's called Everything You Know Need to Know to Get Started Playing the Piano. There's a ton of resources in there. And then honestly, for a beginner, even if you're working through on your own, I would get a book. And this is my favorite for adults. It's the Faber Adult Piano Method, and I'll link it in the description. And I would get a book because it's going to help you stay on task, and it's going to help you move in a progression that makes sense where you're not leaving any holes. It's amazing the world we live in, and it's amazing that we have so many resources online and on YouTube and everywhere that can help us learn. But I will say the one thing and the one common struggle that I hear from adults is just not knowing the exact path to take. So getting a little bit lost, and like maybe you learn this concept and this concept and this concept without realizing that like this concept and this concept are being left out. And then you kind of have to go back. And if you don't mind that, you know, if you don't mind kind of zigging and zagging, that's totally fine. But a book will help you just go in a little bit more of a linear path where you ensure that you're not leaving anything out. So that would be my recommendation. And as far as routine goes, I would say if you could be spending as a beginner 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, that would be like ideal. That is kind of the ideal beginner routine because it gives you enough time to sit at the piano. You're not necessarily playing that whole time, but you're reading, you're learning, you're digesting new concepts. And then you also do have time to practice, and you're doing it regularly enough and consistently enough that there's not huge gaps where you forget it. That's another thing that I see is like a common error is when people want to learn the piano, they'll put in like a month of really intense, really great practice, and then they'll take like 2 months off. And that kind of routine makes it a little bit harder because when we're in the beginning stages of learning like a fine motor skill, we need that regularity to help our body remember what to do, to help things get into our muscle memory, and also just to remember the concepts because some of them are definitely challenging. So great question. Yes, I would love to. Ashley, let's do that. So Ashley's asking if I can work and go through a specific recommendation for a practice routine. Absolutely. If you wouldn't mind unmuting and telling me what you're working on and how much time you have and all of that, we can talk about it.
Okay, hi, I'm Ashley. I wanted to show you some of the books that I have and what I'm working on right now, and see if you could possibly go through like a routine with me.
Sure.
So I would say about 40 minutes is what I've been doing lately, probably 5 days a week. And so I have that book that you just recommended.
Nice.
I've gone a little bit into it. And then I also have the scales book. And I have a couple technique books right now, but I'm sure where I'm going with those at the moment. And then there was the rhythm and what was the book that you just recommended from your last boot camp?
Are you reading?
Yes, I just got that recently.
Oh, nice.
And I have been, so I just started learning as an adult, and I've been working on piano for about a year and a half. Right now I'm working on a couple pieces, Hedwig's theme, and then also Swan Lake, like an easy version of it. So those are kind of my repertoire pieces, but
Awesome.
I was just going to see if you could make some suggestions on where I could go with those things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to. Before I give you suggestions, 2 other questions. One, what do you feel like are the things that you struggle with the most? And 2, do you have any goals, or are you just learning for the sake of doing it because it's fun? Or is there anything specific that you're practicing for?
Well, I think when I was thinking about my goals a while ago, I definitely wanted to be a good sight reader. And I haven't even started working on that
Okay.
specific um, thing yet. I possibly would want to be a performer someday.
Okay.
um, and I'm really into classical music over probably pop, but maybe interested in pop at some point.
Okay. Great. Awesome. So potentially performing, and you want to be you want to be better at sight reading. You're feeling like that's not where you want it to be.
Yes.
Okay, great. So in that case, first of all, congrats. You have awesome supplies and you have a good amount of time. And if you're regularly doing 40 minutes of practice 5 days a week, that's like an amount of time where you're really going to, if you're putting the time in correctly, you're really going to see results like pretty quickly with that, because that's a great amount of time to be devoting. So you have, my one comment would be that you have quite a bit, like you have a lot of books. And so you could try to work in your schedule where you're getting to every single thing. But I would say a better technique for you might be to kind of layer it a little bit. So to get started with some of your shorter term goals. So I would say like focusing on sight reading and focusing on the lesson book, the Faber, because that's going to provide you with like little tiny pieces that you can be doing in like 1 week's time. And then focusing on potentially the scales or the technique. And we'll talk more about that. And then your pieces. Okay. So kind of like those 4 chunks of things. And I mentioned before, like, I don't love to add more than 4 things because even for like the professional level, it gets confusing to try to keep track of all of that, even if you're spending many, many hours at the piano. So with 40 minutes, I would say if you can spend 5 minutes at the beginning of your routine on the sight reading book, that would be a great way to start, because you're really fresh in your practice and you want to improve your sight reading. And those books are a great way to do that. They have 1 exercise per day, and it's actually split up in unit into 5 days. So you can do 1 unit a week and you can kind of like feel that progress with just 5 minutes a day. Going through some of the things we talked about on Wednesday, like making sure that you're setting that timer for 5 minutes and you're fully investigating, you're really taking all of the instructions and all of the suggestions of the book like seriously and really, putting in your best effort with it. That's what I would do for the first 5 minutes. And then I would spend probably about 10 to 15 minutes on the Faber. And that's the book that Ashley held up. It looks like this, although you have the spiral bound one, which is nicer because it opens better. But with this one, you have like every single page basically, or every couple of pages will be a new concept. And so these books are great. And the reason I recommend them for beginners is because it keeps you moving and progressing, but like with little tiny chunks of information at once. So it's digestible. So I would recommend doing that, like picking probably 1 or 2 pages a week. Okay, so for like 5 practice sessions, you're working on 1 or 2 pages in that book for 10 or 15 minutes a day. And you're really trying to understand the concept that it's teaching. And then you're also really trying to play the piece, because they're smaller pieces, as well as possible. And you could take 2 weeks, you could take 3 weeks. Honestly, you could take however long it takes. But your goal is, because that's like a smaller piece, it's a really good mini version of what your goal is with your larger repertoire pieces, right? And so you want to do like as well as good of a job on those pieces as possible, so that you can learn like the process of doing that and then apply it to your bigger pieces. So ideally, you're going through a couple to a few of those a month in those 10 to 15 minutes a day. So that's about, let's say that's 20 minutes. And then I would spend 5 minutes on either scales or technique. And I would say you could alternate if you wanted. So 1 week you could do scales, the other week you could do 1 technique exercise, but I would spend 1 whole week on 1 scale and or on 1 technical exercise. Again, really just like letting it sink in, taking your time with it, allowing yourself to like memorize the fingering, memorize the key signature, get really comfortable, and to the point that you're really proud of the progress, right? Like you're like, I can do this. I feel good about it. So that might take a little longer than a week. It might take less. You'll have to adjust that in your schedule. And then that leaves you the last like 15 to 20 minutes to work on your bigger pieces. So Harry Potter or Swan Lake. And are you working on both of them at the same time?
Right now I'm focused on the Harry Potter song. but the Swan Lake is kind of in the background at the moment.
Yeah. So you could either like focus on one and finish one and then start Swan Lake, or you can do a similar thing where maybe like, you focus on Harry Potter for those 20 minutes one day, and then the next day Swan Lake, and then the next day Harry Potter, and then the next day Swan Lake, and you can alternate them. But I would say my first suggestion, like the best suggestion, would be to do one at a time. So you have full 20 minutes for one song. But if anybody who's like watching or listening is like super antsy to get started on 2 songs, you could always alternate like that. And that would be an option as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that helpful?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I really struggle with is having a plan and sticking to it. And I'm really hoping that I can make use of your like journaling technique that you went over on Monday, and like really dig into, okay, where am I like not fully stepping into something, and where do I need to step away from this thing so that I am better using my time. So
Sure. That totally makes sense. And I think like with that journal, you can then evaluate, like test this out for a week in the order I gave you. And then you might want to change the order a little bit, or you might want to tweak little things. And of course, that's fine, because it's all like a living document that you can always make changes to based on your goals and and that's where like a teacher or you can check in with me again about it. It would be really helpful to help you make those tweaks and to help you make more specific goals within that. But that's a great place to get started.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for asking. Yeah. Okay. So in the Zoom chat, what comes after Faber Adult 1 and 2 method books? That is a good question. I honestly don't remember. I could Google. I don't remember if there's an Adult Faber 3 book. Faber has like a ton of different books, and the books for kids go all the way up to like level 5 or 6, I think. But yeah, the adult one doesn't. So after that, you're done. You've mastered the piano. No, I'm just kidding. After that, if you were working with a teacher and you got all the way to the end of Faber number 2, what we would do is we would then move on to repertoire that you wanted to play, whether that was classical or pop or jazz or whatever genre. We would start to kind of create a practice routine based on what we were just doing for Ashley, where we would pick like a piece or two and some scales and some, other things to fill in that time. And we would create that like your own schedule and your own path of study based on what you would want to do. It'd be exciting if you finish number 2. Okay, and then another question: when sight reading, should you focus on keeping the tempo while getting wrong notes, or write notes at a variable tempo? That's a really good question. I'm going to answer it, but I'm going to ask you to clarify in the chat. So are you talking about sight reading like we talked about on Wednesday, where the goal of sight reading, like you're doing this as an exercise and your goal is to play it as well as possible on the very first try? Or are you talking about sight reading in the context of like the first few times you're looking at a piece that you're going to learn how to play? Because the answer will be different depending. And so I'll give you both. If you're sight reading and you're doing sight reading as an exercise to get better at the process of sight reading, our goal is to pick a tempo that is comfortable enough that hopefully we're not making mistakes and we don't stop. So our goal is to not stop. And that's our goal for sight reading. That's also our goal when eventually we get a piece to the point that we're like maybe getting ready to play it for people. We don't want to stop when we're playing through, right? Like when we're practicing, we want to make sure that we go back and we fix mistakes, because I gave that what is it? Like a statistic, but by Oliver Sacks, who wrote Musicophilia, which is a really great book. And he was saying that for every time you play something incorrect, it takes 9 times of playing it correctly to cancel out that one wrong time. And so we want to keep that in mind. So when we're practicing to learn a piece, we want to make sure we go back. But if you're just practicing sight reading, which you just said in the chat, then our goal is to just keep on. And you will make mistakes. That's going to happen. Like the only guaranteed part of sight reading is that it won't go as expected. There will be things that happen that are unexpected. And the practice there and what you're practicing is that skill of continuing on, excuse me, and of keeping the beat, and of moving forward, and of not getting lost and not letting those hiccups like completely derail your piece that you're trying to read through. So when you're practicing sight reading, just keep going as well as possible. Great question. All right. Okay, I think that's all the questions that I had from the form. I'm going to double check. Okay, so anybody else, go ahead and type your questions in the chat. People in Zoom, does anybody else want to unmute and go ahead and ask a question? We've got time. Looks like, is your arm going to unmute, tell us?
I was waiting to see if someone wants to go.
Oh, got it.
Then I'll go since.
Okay, perfect.
I had a very specific question regarding how to fix a problem.
Okay.
And it goes back to using a piece of a measure of a piece that's giving you trouble and transform that into an exercise that will cure that issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working on this, the Berg-Miller arabesque, you
Okay.
probably know, right? So these ascending 5-note on the right hand, right there.
Yeah.
The issue there that I'm having is the moment I cross into a certain speed, because those notes are kind of crescendo a little bit, my brain is firing a signal that I need power in the fourth and fifth because it's supposed to be louder than the first, second, third.
Yeah.
And that's causing me to kind of associate, okay, for power, I need to raise it to strike.
Mm-hmm.
That is tensing it up, which means that I am, with some frequency, getting uneven notes, right? So if I try it now, let's see. So sometimes I can get it, but sometimes it's like it kind of hiccups.
Yeah.
When it's getting to the 4 and 5.
Yeah.
So I've tried, for example, just going.
Mm-hmm.
Just doing that for a while, but that doesn't seem to be working that well. And then I thought about a little bit of, I think it's the rhythm exercise that you said.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, and then do like 2 notes, 3 notes,
Yeah.
4. But I don't know if that's what you would recommend. But so in summary, to not make this too long, what would you recommend to practice to, number one, get rid of these guys tensing up?
Yeah.
And get more evenness and progressively accelerate?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I have several ideas, and this piece is tough. So I'm glad you brought it in, because every time I've taught this piece, it's similar issues, right? Because these notes are moving so fast. So you were definitely on the right track to do like the rhythms or the going to the third note or the going to the fourth note. But I want to change. I'm going to tweak it slightly in a couple of different ways. So first of all, if you're willing to try, can you play just the, so it's a D and an E, right? Can you just play the D and the E? But I want you to play D, E, and you're going to really accent the E like crazy. And you're going to make the D as short as possible. Mm-hmm.
With 4, 5? Is that what you?
Yeah, so we're going to do it like 7 times in a row. Yeah. Yeah. And when you're doing it, yeah, just like that. When you're doing it, can you rotate your hand to really like let the weight of your arm kind of throw into that pinky? There we go. Yes. Do you hear how much more power you have in the pinky when you do that? Yeah. Now we're gonna do 3 to 4, and we're gonna do the same thing. 3 to 4, 3 to 4. But we'll stop on the 4th finger. Yeah. Yep.
Also with the rotation.
Yep. Yeah, and do it like 5 times in a row.
So you begin 4, 5, and then 3, 4.
Yep. And now we're gonna do 3, 4, 5.
And try to keep them equally spaced.
So we're kind of, but right now we're actually playing around with where we're putting the accent. So we're turning it into a little bit of an exercise. So we're when you do the 3, 4, you want the 4 to be really accented. So do the 3, 4 again a couple times. Yeah, now do the 3, 4, 5 and really land on the 5. There we go. And can you make the 3, 4 even faster and lighter? Da-da-dun. Yeah, there we go. Good. Now we're going to do 2, 3, 4, 5. But really fast. Ba-da-da-bum. Yeah. Now 2, 3, 4, making the 4 really accented. Now 2, 3.
The 5 was trying to kind of.
Yeah, it's thinking about it, right? Now 2, 3.
So like I have to close my eyes and say, "Don't do it" to my hand.
There you go. That's it, though. That's really clean. Now do just 2, 3. 2, 3. Now we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just regularly as you would play it. Yep. But where did that beautiful rotation go? That beautiful rotation that you had. Yeah. Yep.
So you would really rotate it while playing it for real. It would be a visible rotation, or is it going to be really subtle?
It's going to be.
Okay. So it's going to be that much visible. Okay.
Yeah. And the reason, there you go. The reason is because when you do that rotation, if you think about your hand and the way it works, like if we're trying to play each finger individually, it's anybody's game. What is going to happen? Because all of our fingers have like a different amount of power in them, and they also are different lengths. So we can't really trust them to play evenly when we're trying to play that quickly and those 5 fingers in a row. If I keep all of my fingers more or less in the same spot, and if you can line them up this way, so pull them to the edge of the keys as far as possible, there you go, and do that rotation, really all you're doing is you're taking your hands where they are. Yep. Do you feel the difference there?
Yeah. When I was trying to fix this by myself, I tried a little bit of bouncing, and I felt like if it kind of gives it more power because of the momentum of the wrist. But I figured that once you get to a certain speed, there's no time to bounce on every note because you gotta go faster than the bouncing allows, right?
Exactly. And so if you're on the right track to think about the bouncing, because you do want that power behind each note. But when we want to go so fast, we're just going to capture it all in one motion, in like one bounce, basically. Yeah, there it is. And then when you do
are you doing like this down as you go to that side, or is it really like it's more like this, right? There's no like wrist circle. Is there a little bit of wrist circle kind of?
It's like a rotation from this way. It looks like this. And the wrist is almost doing like a little Nike swoosh. Just to get you off at the end, because it's a slur, I believe, in the music, right?
It's a slur ending and a staccato note.
Yeah. So to get you off, you can kind of like let your wrist, it's almost like there's a string here. If you watch my hand, we're going this way, and then a string is kind of pulling your wrist off.
Okay. So I'll try the ones that you said, 4, 5, 3, 4, 3, 4.
Yeah. And basically what we're doing just kind of a variation of the flash practice that you already had in mind. But because this is the weakest part of our hand,
so you're ending there instead of doing the beginning. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm making you also switch around like every combination of note. So that's why we're doing like 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 3, 4, 2, 3. And we're doing every combination as opposed to just one string of notes.
And it's better not to do too much of this per day, like 10 minutes and be done with it, not like overdo.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's actually the flash practice that we were doing. You could do rhythms, and that would be a little bit different. That would be like the long, and you could do that as well. And if you're going to do that, I would actually recommend like starting really slow with the metronome and getting it really good, really slow, and then actually incrementally moving it up in those rhythms. And if you do that and you spend like one day of your 10 minutes of doing just that, it'll help it a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome question. Yeah. Thanks for being brave enough to play for us. That was awesome.
I'll encourage the others.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Other questions from Zoom or in the chat? I recognize some names here. Galaxy S20, it looks like you're getting ready. If you have a question, you can go ahead and unmute.
Now, can you hear me?
I can. Hello, how's it going?
Hi. Good. This is something to do with not so much a master class, but one of the tips that you sent out about 2 or 3 weeks ago had to do with comparing your playing with somebody else's, and that can let you astray because obviously you're going to find people who are better.
Yes.
But that is not an issue with me so much. What I have found is that with certain, well, all pieces, you listen to 5 different pianists playing it, and they're so different than some of the way they play. So here's a quick example, just to play a few bars to show you. This is the Chopin Prelude in E minor. This is how I play it. Little pedaling issue there, but that's the tempo. Now I saw somebody else play it on the video somewhere, and the tempo was more like this. So I don't know if there's obviously a right or a wrong way. My sheet music says Largo, so it doesn't really indicate what speed, but I can listen to 4 of the versions and hear other tempos. And so the frustrating part is listening to different people play. Is there a right or a wrong way?
That's such a great question. I'm really, really glad you asked it. I was just talking to another person about this yesterday. And I think that so whenever, like, it's so hard because we want to consult recordings to help us, right? And I'm guessing that that's what you're doing. You're looking up recordings to say like, okay, how do I do this? Is this right? Is this right? And when you come across so many different recordings, it can be really confusing which one to follow. So I have lots of thoughts on the subject. My first thought is to make sure that the recording you're watching is someone that you know is a professional or is good. You know what I mean? Like whether that means, and that can just mean you like them. That can just mean that you like their recording. It doesn't have to mean that they've won a million awards or that they're concertizing all the time. It can just mean that you connect with their performances and you really like what they're doing. Because when it comes to tempo markings and it comes to dynamics and it comes to really anything in music that is having to do with musicality, it's all subjective, right? It's all completely subjective to the person playing and to what they are trying to convey. And that is amazing and wonderful and beautiful and also very frustrating when you're trying to learn. So if you look up this piece played by 5 different people, you will absolutely find 5 different things. And one of the things that I have my students do, and it's going to make you a better musician, and it's going to strengthen your artistry as well, is to make like a comparing and contrasting chart. And what I do, I'm going to actually share my screen and I'll show you what I do when I do this, is I take, you can start with just 2, or even just 1. You can just start with one person's recording. So let's say I'm listening to Martha Argerich and she's playing this piece. I'm going to say in phrase 1, what does she do? She does a crescendo. Her tempo is like, let's say 45. And she is really exaggerating chord changes in the left hand. Okay, and then I'm going to go on and I'm going to listen to phrase 2, and I'm going to take notes on what she's doing. And I'm also going to write down what I like about it, what I don't like about it. And then I'm going to do that with another recording, and I'm going to do it with another recording. And I'm going to do that with at least 3 recordings to see, first of all, what's out there. Like, what are the options? What are the things that people are even doing? And then 2, what do I like? Because ultimately, it can be hard when we're in the learning process to be confident in our abilities, but you get to make the choice of how you want to play it. Like, what is your version of this piece? Do you like the slower tempo? Do you like the faster tempo? Do you like it with like huge dramatic dynamics, or do you like it a little bit more subtle? I'm just naming things that I've heard people do with this piece. Do you like it with the left hand really quiet, or with those chord changes really being brought out and kind of leaned into? And those are your choices. And listening to other people can be overwhelming because you hear a lot of different things, but it can also help you gain clarity on what you like. And so I'm curious, did you have any thoughts when you were listening, like, oh, they're playing it this way and that's different than what I was doing and I love it, or, oh, I hate that. Did you have any reactions like that?
Yeah, when I heard the second one, I was very slow. To me, it was just too slow. But
Yeah.
it sounded okay. But I was just wondering, again, there's no right or wrong way, but I preferred the way I was doing it.
Yeah, then do it your way. Definitely do it your way. Because yeah, if you're comfortable with that tempo and you like it, the other thing about tempo markings is like we look at them, if you look up all of the, like Largo is really like anywhere from 40 to 60, which is a pretty huge range when we're talking about like trying to nail down a specific tempo. And so you can pick anything within that range and also anything slightly outside of that range, as long as you pull it off and as long as it sounds musical and you like it that way. So go with your gut, go with what you like. And then I do encourage you though, to make those different charts and just kind of listen with even more of a tuned in ear where you're kind of taking notes on everything, because it really helps you like develop your musicianship ideas and your artistry skills of like what you like as far as expression goes.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions about it?
No.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much for asking the question.
Sure.
All right. Let's see. I have a question in the chat. An adult piano player, been learning the piano for around 4 years and got distinction in grade 5 performance in January. Teacher immediately let me start grade 7 pieces. She says I can learn techniques from exam pieces too. Although I'm okay to manage the grade 7 exam pieces, I think I have played too few important pieces. For example, I've only played one Bach invention and no sonata at all. What is your view on this? My teacher is very firm on this and I need to change teacher if I don't agree to this. Okay. Yeah, so this is a great question, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. So you're a little bit worried, it sounds like, that you have some gaps in your learning because you skipped from grade 5 to grade 7. And you're worried like you missed some important pieces. For example, like you only have one Bach invention and you haven't played a sonata yet. And I would say, oh, that's such a good question. And it depends a little bit if you're willing to elaborate in the chat, like what your goals are, or if you want to unmute or just, elaborate in the chat with what your goals are. If my student, usually if I have students that are on this path of taking exams and moving pretty quickly and getting distinctions and stuff, like they have goals to want to be able to play big repertoire or, be a music major or like, do things with music. And so I would say it is important for you to have those gaps filled. But I also will say that you have time, right? Because if your goal is to be at this, you're at grade 7 now. And I don't know if once you pass all of your exams, if you're going to quit piano or, if you're going to continue on, you're going to have time to learn all of these things that you want to learn. I don't often do more than one Bach invention with my students, just as a context, because once they've done an invention and once they've done a sonata and once they've done like that level of things, then we usually move on to potentially like a little prelude or a prelude from a prelude and a fugue or something like that, or a movement of an English suite. And so you don't necessarily have to play more than one Bach invention once you've played one, because you can move on to other pieces within Bach or within the Baroque period that will teach you like that next level of that period. As far as the sonata goes, it is really good. It's important. I'm sure you will play sonatas at some point. I'm curious if you've played any sonatinas. I'm going to guess yes, if you've already gone all the way through grade 5. But like, yeah, introducing a sonata soon would be very important. So I would say as long as your teacher has a plan, which I would guess that they do if they're a good teacher, that they have some kind of plan of like, okay, we did an invention and now we're going to move on to this Bach piece or this Scarlatti piece, and we're going to insert some sonatas here and here and here. As long as there's a plan, I would say you're probably okay with that. You've played many sonatinas. Yeah. So it sounds like you're on the right track, as long as your teacher has a plan. And that might be a conversation. If maybe you already know what the plan is and maybe you're worried about the plan, then I would say, you can always interview other teachers and consider switching. But if your teacher has a plan on like the path of study and what you're going to do next, and it's in line with doing either some more sonatinas or moving on to some of the earlier, easier sonatas, and maybe going on to some more challenging Baroque repertoire, I would say that's pretty spot on with what I would be doing with my student that were in a similar position based on this limited knowledge that I have from the chat. and some Chopin preludes. Yeah, that's really great. So I would say you're ready for a sonata. You're ready for maybe a bigger romantic piece, whether that's like an earlier Liszt piece or if you've done like several Chopin preludes, I would move you away from Chopin into like some Brahms or Schumann or Liszt or Clara Schumann or someone else. And then definitely introduce you to some sonatas here in the next little while. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that answered your question. You could always write to me more specifically if you want me to elaborate on that, or if you want to give me more details. Awesome. Well, we probably have time for about 1 or 2 more questions. If anybody has them. This has been just so awesome to have you all here. I've really enjoyed getting to know you. Oh, good. I'm glad I could ease your mind. Yeah, it sounds like you're right on track. It does. Okay. Well, I'm going to pull up. Interrupt me if you have a question. But I'm going to pull up my screen here for just a minute. If I can get it to work. There we go. So I just wanted to say thank you for coming. This week has been so awesome. There's been so much enthusiasm, and I really hope that all of this information has helped you. My goal here is to help everybody and to make this process as easy as possible. It's truly been an honor for me to meet each of you, whether it's been on Zoom or in the chat or in the comments at a later point, or I know some of you have even emailed me. And it's been great to talk to all of you and to get to know you. And I feel super honored to just be a part of your musical journey. We've learned in this past week that practicing doesn't have to be super complicated. It is, right? We're doing complicated things, but once you have the tools and the resources that you need, we don't necessarily have to have that frustration and that like difficult, overwhelming feeling. And we certainly don't have to get stuck in ruts when we're practicing, right? So let me know if you're feeling a little bit of relief from some of the overwhelm, or if you're feeling a little more clarity on what you'd like to do going forward. Because once it becomes clear how to practice based on your specific struggles with your pieces and your goals, that measurable progress really starts to just like skyrocket through the roof. And the process can feel so much more simple, which is wonderful. Levels in a school style and testing. Yeah, so sorry, someone's asking if I can talk about going through the levels in a school style. And Ashley, do you mean like if I'm teaching someone a private lesson and we're like going through a book and like going through different levels like that? Or what do you mean by school style? If you can clarify a little bit of that, I will absolutely tell you what that looks like. So with testing, it really depends. There's like a couple of different ways that you can do testing, a couple of different programs that you can do, and they all have their pros and cons, but the basic format is that you take these level tests that involve different versions of like playing certain repertoire to a certain level. So you have to learn them like to a certain distinction, and then doing theory exams and ear training exams and all of that. And so level 1 would be, they give you like a repertoire list of all of the options of pieces that you can play. And they're usually in the Western classical vein. And then you would take your theory examination, your ear training, and anything else that goes along with that. And then you would go on to level 2 and you do the same thing. And depending on the testing method, some of them are like once a year, some of them are twice a year, just as far as like how often you're moving through the levels. And so that's usually how that works. They're great. Oh, like the ABR, got it. So yeah, it's a great way to work on, like if you want to make progress in like a very specific and traditional way, then it's a really great way to do that. And I have several adult students that have done it that really like the format and like the way that it keeps them motivated and working like that. And I would say the only downside is there's a little bit less freedom as far as like choosing repertoire and things like that, because you are working within the confines of like repertoire lists. And I would recommend this journey of like testing to any students that like really want to go for it, and maybe people that like taking tests. Because I would say you can get the same kind of thing from a teacher that has a path of study and that, does like recitals, or that gives you opportunities in group classes to perform and all of that kind of stuff. Like you can get similar experiences and similar path of study, but if you need that fire underneath you, and if you like are really motivated by those tests and those like guide points, then I absolutely recommend it for students like that, for sure. And I would say if you're going to do it, just make sure you have a teacher that also can encourage you and make sure that you're not getting burnt out and all of that good stuff that goes along with that. So that's a really great question, Ashley. Thanks for asking. Yeah, you are so welcome. This is awesome. It was great to be live with you too. It's like I've seen names, I've seen videos of people, I've chatted with you in comments, but it's so cool to be in an actual Zoom with you. So, so I just wanted to wrap up by saying, I was kind of saying like what was I saying? Yeah, once it becomes clear like how to practice based on what your goals are and what your pieces are and all of that, then that measurable progress really starts to happen, and you really start to see that, which is great. And the process starts to feel more simple, and that's awesome. That's what we all want, right? So what we covered this last week in this boot camp was basically the tip of the iceberg of what I cover in my new membership program called Casual to Confident Piano Player. And this membership and program was designed specifically with you in mind, and I'm so excited to share it with all of you. And so I just want to tell you a little bit about it. We have tons of group classes that are scheduled throughout the month, and the group classes are kind of similar to this Zoom format that we've been doing today, where we meet in Zoom. You ask specific questions. I'll usually have people play like whole entire pieces if they're willing to do it. And you can attend any of these classes. At the moment, there's 8 scheduled throughout the month, but that can change based on how many people are in it at any given time. And you can attend any of them that you want, and you can play in 2 of them. And the wonderful thing about these group classes is that you can ask questions, you get answers and feedback that's totally specific to you. And as we've seen today, that's kind of important, because when we're chatting questions, or when we're asking general questions, or when I'm trying to answer general questions, I can't completely tailor that answer specifically to the person that I'm talking to. But in those classes, I get to see you face to face, and we go over your playing, your goals, so that that process can be simple for you, and so that those results are really measurable. And so that you start to produce that music that is inside of you that I know you can produce. When you join the membership, you get a one-on-one with me, a 30-minute coaching. And so we can talk about your goals. We can go over a practice routine. It can be more like a traditional lesson where you play for me and I tell you what to do and, give you feedback on how to practice and all of that. But that's a great time just to get to know you and get some face time and ensure that you have everything that you need to continue or to get started on the right path. And these classes are also recorded, which is pretty cool. So they're on demand inside the membership, which is a login page on my website. So if you miss a class, or if you heard something really important in a class and you want to, continue to watch it during your practice time, you have access to all of those videos on demand. There's a private Facebook group, so that in between classes, you can ask questions, post videos, and that's super important. So you basically have access to answers whenever you need them, and you don't need to wait. And then this is the thing that I'm super excited about also. I've created a video guide, because I have so many videos out in the universe on various platforms, and they're really, really helpful. But I created a guide that will take you through like in a methodical path of study kind of way. And I've included practice tips of like how to utilize the video at various points for the best results. And so that is also inside the membership. You'll get access to that video guide where you can kind of follow along, so that every single time you sit down at the piano to practice, you'll have something to follow along with and to help you get those results. So again, I just want to thank you for attending. I'd love to extend the invitation to all of you to join this musical community with me and with other like-minded adults that share this same commitment to musical improvement. And we get to connect with each other and connect with me and just celebrate in the joy of all of our musical journey. With the consistency of this program, learning is absolutely inevitable, right? It's going to happen, and it won't feel nearly as complicated. I'll be able to show you different ways to spend your time practicing and develop a plan specifically for you, so that you can gain that confidence and really catapult your learning to the next level. And as just a thank you, and for, honoring your time and your commitment to your piano learning, I want to give you this membership for $99 a month, which is not the usual price. It's a discounted price, and it'll be available for a few days for those of you that are watching this after the fact. And if you're interested in doing it, you can go ahead and go to my website. It's right here on the screen, ashleyjyoung.com/piano member. You've already shown that you're committed to getting better. And I believe that you deserve to have access to all of the tools and all of the resources to make this process as easy and as simple as possible. So go ahead and check it out. I look forward to seeing you on the inside. And let me know if you have any questions. I'm always here. You can always reach me. If you've been getting emails, you can just reply to those emails. You can contact me on Facebook, on YouTube. I look forward to hearing from all of you. Happy practicing and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye, everybody.